Jury never imagined love would find him in a foreign land. At 22, he had left his home in Africa to study engineering in a European city that hummed with life but often felt cold to him. The towering buildings, the hurried conversations, the unfamiliar customs. Everything reinforced his status as an outsider. Yet, amidst the anonymity, he found solace in routine. Mornings at the university library, evenings at a quiet cafe near his dorm, and weekends spent exploring the city alone. It was in that cafe that he first met Radha. Jury had been reading when a voice interrupted him. "You always sit here alone. Mind if I join?" Looking up, he saw a young man with tousled blonde hair and an easy smile. His eyes, a shade of blue that shifted in the light, held something inquisitive, almost teasing. Jury hesitated, unused to such directness, but something about Radha's confidence felt disarming. He gestured to the empty chair. Their first conversation was effortless. Jury learned that Radha was an art student, passionate about photography and storytelling. He spoke with an energy that contrasted Jury's measured calm. He found fascination in Jury's background, asking about his home, his culture, his dreams. Unlike others who made him feel like an outsider, Radha made him feel seen. One meeting turned into several. They discovered shared interests: music, poetry, late-night walks through the city. With Radha, Jury felt something shift within him. The barriers he had carefully constructed to protect himself began to weaken. It wasn't just friendship, it was something deeper, something terrifyingly real. One evening, as they sat on a rooftop overlooking the city, Radha's voice softened. "Have you ever been in love, Jury?" Jury hesitated. "I don't know," he admitted. Radha turned to him, his gaze unreadable. "I think I have." A pause. "With you." Jury's breath caught. The words lingered between them, fragile yet undeniable. He had spent his life suppressing feelings that felt too dangerous to acknowledge. But here, under the glow of city lights, Radha had spoken them aloud, breaking through the silence Jury had lived in for years. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he let the moment settle, let himself feel the weight of it. And then, without thinking, he reached for Radha's hand. From that night on, they were inseparable. In private, their love flourished: stolen kisses, whispered confessions, shared dreams of a future without fear. But in public, they remained careful, knowing the world was not always kind to love like theirs. Still, Radha was fearless. "One day," he promised, "we won't have to hide." Jury wanted to believe him. But even in the warmth of Radha's embrace, a small, unshakable doubt lingered in the back of his mind. One that whispered love was never without risk. And deep down, he feared that some promises were meant to be broken. For a while, love felt effortless. Jury and Radha created a world of their own, one untouched by expectations or fear. They spent their days wrapped in stolen moments, whispering dreams of a future where their love wasn't something to be hidden. Radha spoke of traveling together, of sunlit mornings in cities far away, of freedom. And Jury, despite the cautious voice in his head, let himself believe. But reality had a way of creeping in. At first, the changes were subtle. Radha's texts became slower, his calls shorter. When Jury asked, Radha brushed it off. "Just stress from classes," he'd say, flashing that same easy smile. But there was something else, something unspoken lurking beneath his reassurances. One evening, as they walked by the river, Jury asked the question that had been gnawing at him. "Why don't I ever meet your friends?" Radha hesitated. "It's not that simple." Jury waited, but no further explanation came. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken truths. That night, Radha kissed him harder, held him longer, as if trying to erase the doubt seeping in. But Jury couldn't ignore the feeling. Love should not come with conditions. Then came the first real sign that something was wrong. One night, while waiting for Radha at his apartment, Jury's eyes wandered to Radha's phone, vibrating insistently on the table. He wasn't the type to pry, but the name flashing on the screen sent a chill through him. "I miss you. When can I see you?" His stomach clenched. Before he could process, the door opened. Radha walked in, saw Jury staring at the phone, and his expression shifted, guilt flickering across his face before he forced a smile. "Who was that?" Jury asked, his voice steady but laced with something raw. Radha picked up his phone, locking the screen with a casual shrug. just a friend. But the air between them had changed. Jury wanted to believe him. He wanted to trust the boy who had once promised they would never have to hide. But trust required honesty, and Radha had just given him a reason to doubt. Days passed, and the distance grew. Radha became unpredictable, one moment affectionate, the next distracted. When Jury questioned him, Radha reassured him with soft kisses and half-truths. But the doubt had already taken root. Then, one evening, Radha looked at him differently. There was hesitation in his eyes, a flicker of something Jury couldn't place. He took Jury's hand, squeezed it gently. "I need to tell you something," he murmured. Jury's heart pounded. Every instinct told him this was the moment that would change everything. Radha opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, his phone rang. He pulled away, glancing at the screen. And in that split second, Jury saw it. Fear. And suddenly, he knew. Radha was keeping something from him. The truth came unexpectedly. Not in a dramatic confession, not in an argument, but in a moment of devastating clarity. Jury had planned a surprise. A simple gesture, showing up at Radha's apartment with his favorite pastries, the ones he always claimed tasted like home. A small act to remind them of what mattered. But when he arrived, the door was slightly ajar. Voices drifted from inside, low and urgent. Jury hesitated. His name wasn't spoken, yet something about the hushed tone, the nervous laughter, made his chest tighten. He stepped closer, pushing the door open just enough to see inside. And there, standing too close to Radha, was a woman. Blonde, elegant, familiar in a way that Jury couldn't immediately place. Then he saw her hand on Radha's arm, the way his shoulders stiffened at her touch, and suddenly it became unbearably clear. Radha wasn't just keeping secrets. He was living two lives. The room seemed to tilt. Blood pounded in Jury's ears, but he forced himself to stay. To listen. "I can't keep doing this," Radha was saying, his voice strained. "It's not fair to either of you." "Either of you." Jury's breath caught. The woman sighed, her grip tightening. "You know what's expected of you, Radha." Expected. The word rang in Jury's mind like a cruel joke. He finally understood who she was. Not a passing stranger, not a friend, but his fiancée. Something inside him shattered. He should have walked away, but the betrayal rooted him in place. When Radha finally turned and met his gaze, his face drained of color. "Jury." His voice broke on the name. The woman turned, frowning. "Who is this?" Jury let out a hollow laugh. "Go on, Radha. Tell her." Radha stepped forward, his eyes pleading. "It's not what you think." Jury flinched as if struck. "Not what I think." His voice was quiet, but beneath it was a storm. "You promised me. You made me believe we had something real." Radha's face twisted with regret, but regret wasn't enough. "I never wanted to hurt you," he whispered. Jury exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "You didn't just hurt me. You made me trust you, only to destroy it." The silence that followed was suffocating. The woman, still confused, looked between them, realization slowly dawning. But Jury no longer cared. The fight, the explanations, the excuses, none of it mattered anymore. He stepped back, his heart heavy but resolute. "I hope she's worth the lie," he murmured before turning away. Radha called after him, but Jury didn't stop. For the first time in months, he saw things clearly. Radha had never been fearless. He had only ever been a coward. The days that followed felt like moving through water, slow, heavy, suffocating. Jury had thought heartbreak would come in sharp, unbearable moments, but instead it settled in waves. Some nights he was numb. Other nights, the betrayal hit him with full force, leaving him breathless in the dark. Radha reached out, of course. Messages filled Jury's phone, each one laced with desperation. "Please talk to me. I never meant to hurt you. I love you." Jury read them all but never responded. Love, he realized, was not just about words. It was about choices, and Radha had made his. For weeks, Jury wandered the city, retracing the paths they had walked together. The cafe where they first met. The rooftop where Radha whispered his first confession. The riverbank where Jury had dared to believe in a love that was never meant to last. Each place was a ghost of what once was, a reminder of what would never be again. But grief, like love, was not meant to last forever. One evening, as he sat alone in the cafe, the weight on his chest felt lighter than before. The world around him had not changed. Laughter still filled the air, couples still held hands, but something within him had. He was not broken. He was not ruined. He was simply healing, and healing meant letting go. That night, he opened his phone one last time. Radha's final message sat unread. "If you ever forgive me, I'll be waiting." Juri stared at it for a long moment before pressing delete. Radha had been a lesson, not a destination. And Juri, he was still whole, still worthy of love, the kind that didn't need to be hidden, the kind that didn't end in betrayal. As he stepped out into the night, the air felt different. Lighter, hopeful. A new beginning had already started. And this time, Juri was choosing himself.